Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron. This is season 4, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk with thought leaders and experts from all over the world. We're going to hear amazing stories of innovation in education from teachers, consultants, and AI experts and others who are fearlessly innovating and creating unique active learning experiences. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Lack of confidence can often get compounded, and we are seeing children as they're getting older with increasing numbers of children being diagnosed with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, those kind of issues that are, I think, massively preventable if we help children play more and play well when they're young.
Dr. Amanda Gummer has a PhD in neuropsychology and has spent years studying the benefits of play and the need for children to experience independent, unstructured playtime. Listen in as she explains the science and offers practical tips for parents and teachers on how to build healthy playtime into your child's daily activities. Keep listening. I have with me Dr. Amanda Gummer. She's a research psychologist passionate about children's play. She's the CEO of the research consultancy Fundamentally Children. That's Fundamentally Children. Home of Dr. Gummer's Good Play Guide. Amanda is also the independent chair of the Association of Play Industries. Amanda has a PhD in neuropsychology, the Postgraduate Certificate in Higher Education, and over 20 years experience working with children and family. Her book, Play, was published in May 2015 and has been translated into different languages, with extracts being published in the USA's Toy Industry Association Genius of Play initiative, for which she is an expert ambassador. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Of course, I love play. If you've been listening, following my podcast at all, I talk a lot about games-based learning. And so, but my initial question for you to kind of get us going here is why? Why is play so important for the development of children? And you kind of target this kind of preparing kids for school. So why is play so important for preparing kids for school? And I know that's a big question. So, take however much time you
No,
want, and I will jump in if I need to.
of course. Yeah, no. So first of all, play is for everybody. I think, the whole "you're never too old to play" is never truer than it is now. And I think that children learn such a lot through play that we are doing them a disservice by restricting how they play, where they play, when they play, because it's it's what they do, it's how they learn, it's how they process things that are happening to them, it's how they make sense of the world, it's how they learn new things, it's how they try out ideas. So we've just the reason you mentioned the school readiness angle is that we've just done a big campaign this summer, big research project, where we talk to teachers, parents, and 4 to 8 year olds in the UK and the US about what worked for them with getting ready for school, because we can see the headlines. We've all heard teachers complaining that kids starting school now don't have the skills that they did, 5, 10 years ago. And it's not about, so there's a whole conversation about whether the school system is fit for purpose and how to accommodate different learning styles and children with additional needs and all of that kind of stuff. But there is a fairly stark fact that children are not developing certain skills, in the way that they used to, and that's causing problems. And I mean, even if you just take confidence, if you start school and that you can, put your own clothes on, or take yourself to the toilet, or even, write your own name, or recognize your name on a coat peg or something, it just gives you the confidence. If you can communicate with other children and ask for help when you need it, you have that confidence, so you start school with a positive attitude. If you don't, that lack of confidence can often get compounded. And so then, and we are seeing children as they're getting older with, increasing numbers of children being diagnosed with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, those kind of issues that are, I think, massively preventable if we help children play more and play well when they're young.
Interesting. So, oh, there's so many things I want to ask. It's like, but why? But why? Right? So, all right. So, where do I begin with this? You've just opened so many doors. There's, all right. So, confidence. You talk a bit about confidence, but first, let's get to what do you think has changed? So, you commented that something has been happening kind of in the last 10 years that makes this even more kind of urgent now that people grasp this need to let kids play. So, what's changed?
A few things. So, first of all, the most obvious one is digital. There is a lot more time of children are spending more time just solitary, sedentary, and passive activities on a screen. And that is too much of that deprives them of opportunities to play more creatively or socially or imaginatively. And they're the things that really help children learn a range of skills. Pressures on parents, cost, the world, certainly the Western world, is going through a cost of living crisis. Parents are more stressed, they have less money, they have less time. And so children are sort of anything that keeps the kids quiet is
Yep.
a bit of a is a temptation, and there is less, maybe there's less emotional availability and less willingness or time to play with your kids and to really set up those playful opportunities. There's also, increasing traffic, decreasing funding for public parks and playgrounds. So the opportunities for kids to just go out and play like previous generations did has massively reduced because parents are understandably worried about letting their kids just go out. And again, that's almost got to that sort of tipping point where you're now seen as a bad parent if you let your kids go down the park unsupervised. Whereas, 20 years ago, most kids of 8 to 10 year olds would be down the park with older kids. Everybody would look out for each other. It would be a relatively safe space. And now it's seen as, you can't, parents don't let their kids walk to school on their own. They don't let the kids go out around the neighborhood on their bikes. They don't go, all of that freedom that kids have had to play. And that's what they do when they have that freedom. Kids' natural state is play.
Mm.
It's being restricted. That, with overscheduling, you've got a lot of families who take their kids from school to a piano lesson, to a swimming lesson, to a extra tuition for maths or whatever it is, and that every minute of the day is scheduled, and it's all with really good intentions, but it's actually reducing the time that children get to play, and it's reducing the opportunity for them to learn the things that they develop when they do get to play freely.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those things. What are the things specifically that play develops? You mentioned confidence, but what else?
So, yeah, so it develops a range of skills, and we have a model called the balanced play pyramid. And there's three sides to the pyramid: the what, the where, and the who of play. And what skills kids develop depends on what they're doing and who with and where. So the superfoods of the play diet, if you like, and this is the sort of the user-friendly way we explain this, is in the same way that if your children were, eating vegetables and wanted more broccoli, you had it, you would let them have it. So the sort of the superfoods of the play diet are the active, emotional, active, imaginative, creative, child-led social play. So playing outside with your friends, with just making it up as you go along, that is developing so many skills. It develops leadership for the older kids, it develops initiative, it develops compromise, communication, empathy, collaboration, a whole heap, and confidence and resilience and all of that kind of stuff. So that is amazing. If you're playing a board game with your grandparents, you're learning to follow rules, you're learning to take turns, you're probably learning to count and practice reading instructions. So different types of play have different roles in a child's development, which is why the whole concept of a balanced play pyramid or balanced play diet is so powerful.
Okay, I had a whole question around that, kind of expecting it to come up later, but this is good. So, yeah, so this pyramid, so there's things that are, you call them superfoods of play, right? But and you already talked about kind of screen time and passive, right? So that's kind of the bad part of the pyramid. That's the junk food, is it?
I guess so, if you want to see it like that. But in the same, I mean, solitary, sedentary, passive is definitely the sort of the high salt, fat, sugar stuff. And it is the stuff that needs limiting, but it has a place. You know, we need time to just zone out. We need time to relax. We don't need 8 hours of it a day. We need, but you know, when you've been out, and again, putting it back into the nutritional analogy, if you've eaten all your vegetables and you've had your fill and you're still hungry and you fancy a bit of chocolate, that's okay. You wouldn't have chocolate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So
Oh,
it's
I
just
might, but
making sure. Yeah, your doctor might have something to say about that. But yeah, so it's that kind of helping children get into healthy habits so that they have that balance of activities and are able to get everything. I mean, even if you just ate broccoli all the time, you would have a deficiency in your diet. So even the good stuff needs countering with a mixture of other things to give children time to relax, to give children time to regroup, to be on their own and explore. And you know, there's a massive push at the minute about how kids aren't reading like they used to. And I think it is a real shame. But we used to worry about kids being bookworms because they weren't getting the exercise, they weren't getting the social, they were a bit nerdy, bit shy, and that was a worry. And it's the same thing. We want our children to be balanced and happy and healthy. And the way that children develop is is by developing holistically is the easiest path for the parents as well as the kids, because everything reinforces each other and it allows children to grow up in a organic, natural way, and they're able to do things at their own pace, and each child's different, so you need that flexibility.
yeah, no, it is interesting, and I can see the dilemma here in terms of. So you commented on, we used to be able to just go out and wander, right? When I was growing up in my neighborhood, we went off for hours endlessly. I mean, we would get on a bicycle and ride miles from the house on our
Hmm.
own and go visit friends or whatever. And my parents never really worried that we weren't going to come home, right? If something happened to us, somebody in the neighborhood would go, oh,
Yeah.
you're a Byron boy. Let me call your mom. That would come pick you
Yeah.
up, right? Because you got a flat tire, the chain came off your bike or whatever. But in today's world, you just can't send your kid out there like that.
No.
And you add to it this stress of hearing it every day, US news, right? Another school shooting. And so these kids are being trained from really young that, you know, you got to do all the drills and be ready for a mass shooting in your school, active shooter drills. In fact, I saw a note this week on a church in the US that was attacked and he shot it up and then set it on fire. And they said afterwards the children were actually better prepared for the trauma. They actually responded better because they were drilled on this stuff in school on what to do if there's an active shooter. So the adults were a mess and the kids actually kind of knew what to
Yeah,
do.
but isn't
But it's
isn't that sad
horrifying.
though? We don't,
Yeah,
yeah, we don't want to live in a world where fear is how we educate kids. We don't want to tell them that they can't go and play down the park because they might get shot. That's just, I mean, that just breaks my heart.
right, right. So, but how do we get it? Because it's a real fear. I can understand a parent saying, no, I'm not letting my kid go unsupervised, out of the house down to the park to play because there's a pedophile or there's a whatever concern it is that you have. These are real concerns in today's world. So how do we get these kids together and playing?
So there is that if there was an easy answer, we'd have fixed it by now, right? But there's a
Yeah.
complex set of things going on. First of all, you get to that tipping point where if you've got a community playground that is within easy reach of enough families, that they can start by, organizing a community rota so that there's always a trusted grown up on there, and that gives the kids the opportunity to just go. And it's very different when you've got somebody's neighbor as there is an adult there, but it's not your parents, because you do
Mhm.
need, as a child, you need to be able to develop that independence, and not always have mom or dad there to sort of look up to, and to fix whatever problem befalls you. So having that, so we need to invest in community play spaces, number one. We need to educate parents around where the real fears are. The risk of paedophilia or child abduction, and I know it's in the news a lot at the moment because of the Epstein files and all the rest of it. The risk of that relative to previous generations is actually a lot less. We have a lot more technology, we have a lot more awareness. That is not as much of a risk as it used to be. Traffic, on the other hand, massive risk. The cars have been made faster and safer for the drivers, and big SUVs where kids could be smaller than the bonnet. You're
Yep.
not going to see them. So understanding the traffic risks and learning how well, figuring out how to mitigate against those, absolutely important. So again, having local play spaces that are accessible via subways or underpasses or bridges or pedestrian crossings, and teaching the children how to use those to get to where they need to get to, absolutely key. So I think there's a kind of a we need to not be scaremongering about stuff that isn't as big a threat as people are making out to be, but we need to address some of the issues that are real threats. And even just moving around the neighborhood, being able to go on your bike 3 blocks across to go and call on a friend to go and play, or to be able to go and have a group of you meet on a playing field and just kick a ball about, that kind of stuff. Moving around very car centric neighborhoods is a real challenge for kids, and I think that's one of the biggest changes. So I think there's that. I think we need to educate families and policymakers and teachers on the importance of that balanced play diet, that active social imaginative play, so that kids get opportunities to do that in less structured ways. Taking them to after school clubs and swimming lessons and football clubs and stuff is great, but not if that's all they do. They need that downtime. And I think families also need to understand, or sort of see the bigger picture, to understand what it is that they're depriving their kids of if they don't let them play. Because it's not just oh, let's just keep them safe and indoors and I know where they are. You're depriving them of opportunities to learn, to be happy and healthy, and to be ready to take on the world when they do go out into it as adults.
Yeah. Well, and one of my analogies is, kids need to fall out of a tree or two. They just need
Yeah.
to, experience that, climbing trees and,
And I
getting out
yeah.
of the house, as you say, out there with a ball. Now, I grew up in a very rural area where, we went out and threw apples at trees and we built
Yeah.
forts in the woods and all that stuff that, now I live in Hong Kong, you don't do that sort of thing here. But Hong Kong's actually an incredibly safe place. Kids can go out here and wander around and nobody worries. I see young kids quite regularly taking themselves to wherever they're in the elevator, they go down the building and out they go and off into the neighborhood somewhere. So yeah, it's different, but anyway, all right. So I don't want to focus too much on the negative side of that because I think that there's some real positives. A theme that comes up regularly on my show is also this theme of community, and that even if you don't have kids, right, understanding that I live in this community, it's part of my role, I hope, right? People start to view it this way of finding those safe spaces and making kids feel safe in their neighborhood, right? So, making a point to introduce yourself to the parents and say, I'm here, I live here, right? Introduce me to your kids so if they see me, right, they feel safe around me, right? And I guess you still have that issue of, are you a weirdo? Are you a, a scary
Yeah.
man, right? You got to build that trust and rapport, but communities need to come together, I think. And as you pointed out, safe spaces. We intentionally, when my kids were young, we bought a house on a cul-de-sac. So we had, we could get to know a small set of neighbors. They all had kids, and so our kids played together on the cul-de-sac. But it was nice for us because any of the neighbors could kind of look out the front windows and see the kids playing in the cul-de-sac. We knew where they were.
Yeah.
Everybody could see them. Yeah.
And
But they were
today's world is different,
unstructured.
but
And I like that point
yeah.
too, sorry, that you made about unstructured play versus structured play. So let's talk a little bit more about that and why that's so important. And as a parent, how do you kind of say, I want to help, I want to be active in getting my kids to play, but yeah, how do you get them to be unstructured?
So there's a few things. So one is just giving kids the time and the space to do that, and not rushing in when they say I'm bored or what are we doing. Leave it for them to decide. Let them, give them a couple of options maybe to start with if they're not used to making those kind of decisions. Do you want to? There's toys over there. Do you want to do that? Do you want to play a game? Do you want to read a book? Do you want to, go down to the park? Whatever it is, give them some feasible options, and then if for some children, especially those who aren't used to it, that can be quite daunting. So keep the options small and easy. So do you want to read a book or play a game? Do you want to, go outside, play outside or inside? Just keep it really simple, but don't rush in. And one of the things that my mum used to say is, well, first of all, she said, intelligent people don't get bored, was one of the things, or clever kids don't get bored. And that was quite a nice way because you want to feel like you're clever and and you can
Mhm.
make. And the other thing she said was, if you can't think of something to do, I will think of something to do for you, and you probably won't like it because it would be a chore or something. So that
Right.
quite quickly got us into the habit of, okay, we can go and play. I think the other thing is to then leave them to it, to to let them know by, having the radio on in the kitchen or whatever it is you're doing, that you're there and you're within shouting distance if they need you, but letting them just letting them be, letting them do, because that teaches them decision making. It teaches them to know themselves. What do I like? Who am I? What am I good at? What am I interested in? And what right now do I feel like doing? And how can I do that? Am I feeling a bit under the weather and I want something that's comforting and that's going to make me feel good? Am I up for a challenge? Do I want to do something energetic and learn something new? Do I want to solve a problem that I've been that's been bothering me? If you're always structured, you're being told what to do when, you never get that chance to that develop that emotional intelligence, that internal emotional intelligence that goes, you know what, this is me, this is what I like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I want to invest my time in getting better at, this is what I feel like doing, and this is what brings me joy. And knowing what makes you happy is one of the best gifts we can give to our kids, helping them learn
Hmm.
about themselves. And that comes from a bit of time where you've just got nothing to do, nothing planned for you, nothing, no expectations, no demands. And that's really, really powerful. And then, reinforce that, oh, I saw you got really into that jigsaw puzzle you were doing. That's brilliant. How did that make you feel? I saw you were playing that imaginative role play game, whatever, with your brother. I loved how you played really well together. That positive reinforcement when kids do take the initiative and do play well. And then, yes, they you can help them they get involved in tidying it up afterwards and all the rest of it. And if it does go horribly wrong and it ends in tears, that's a teachable moment too.
Hmm. All right. So play devil's advocate with you. So unstructured, wonderful. I
Mhm.
absolutely agree with you. Imagination, creativity, autonomy. The kids get to pick and choose, which is really,
Mhm.
really powerful, builds confidence and free spirit and all of that. But school is very structured, generally speaking. So are we teaching them something that we're then going to take away when they go to school?
So I think it's about balance, and I would love to see schools be more open-ended and creative with their learning approach, and have give children in much more autonomy in their learning. And some schools do that really well. But yeah, a lot of time in schools you are sitting down and being told what to do and when to do and how to do it, and you're learning new skills, which makes out of school play even more important, that there is that unstructured time. Because if you go through a day of being told what to do and where to sit and who to sit next to and what to do, and you then go from there to your after school lesson on, swimming or piano, and you're told where to line up and what to do and how to do it, you can go through your entire day without any free choice, you're not having to make any decisions for yourself. You're just doing what you're told.
Mm.
And that doesn't develop children's initiative. It doesn't develop their creativity. We're living in a very uncertain world. We need to prepare our children for an uncertain future. And one of those skills has got to be being able to take the information you've got and make decisions about where to go next and how to proceed. And if kids have never had to make a decision in their life, we can't expect them to do that very well when they get to grown-ups.
Preaching to the choir here. I completely agree with you. Let's take a quick commercial break. I'm going to do my usual plug here for the Human Intelligence Movement. This is not a paid advertisement. I'm just a fan. And I just want to point out, so the mission here, the Human Intelligence Movement, is to ensure that all students have the skills to, thrive in an AI world. Okay, so I put a link in the show notes. Please check that out. The work they're doing is wonderful, and I want you to support them. All right, now back to my conversation with Dr. Gummer as we dive more into the importance of curiosity and how we develop social skills by playing together with you. So, all right, I want to talk about another specific thing. You call it one of the pillars is curiosity. So this is one I've actually we've talked about this a lot on the show in a number of different contexts, but I want to measure curiosity in students, right? We say we want to measure what's important, right? We make something
Hmm.
important by measuring it. And sometimes we're measuring all the wrong things, but curiosity keeps coming up as one of these things that, particularly in the age of AI and information is abundant, we need kids asking questions, right? We need them to be curious and wanting to learn. So,
Hmm.
so talk to me a little bit about that in terms of play. Why does play make kids more curious or develop this skill?
So play by its nature is often unscripted, so you don't know what's going to happen. And I wonder what happens if is one of the great, that is curiosity, right? I wonder what's going to happen if. So I wonder what's going to happen if I put this block on top of this block. Oh, the tower falls down. I've learned that. What if I do it in a different way? So that trial and error learning, it's built in. Kids are naturally curious. They are interested in the world. Their brains are set up from before birth, but certainly, in those early years to just absorb information. And they they are designed to try and make sense of it. They want to understand how the world works, and they do that through play. So, you know, playing with, I know, Fireman Sam teaches them about how the world works when there's a fire and what the emergency services do, and playing, going on an adventure pack in a backpack and pretending you're an explorer. That teaches you about how, survival skills or whatever. There's all sorts of different areas of the world that we don't know about, and play can really bring the wider world into a child's living room or into a child's environment, and things that they wouldn't necessarily experience. And whether that's through character-based play, so you've got your fireman or your policeman or your bold builder or your spaceman or whatever, and you're imagining what that must be like, or whether it's playing a game that is designed to help children learn about recycling or, geography and what going around the world and everything. So it helps children children are naturally, young children are very egocentric. Their world is very small. Their
Hmm.
parents are omnipotent, and everything is, whatever happens within their world is very sort of close to them. As children get older, they understand that the world is much more complicated, much richer, much more diverse, much more interesting, much more exciting. And that curiosity is is what helps children. build tolerance and relate to other people and want to learn more about this amazing planet that we live on.
Yeah. Which brings me to another pillar, social skills. So, and I love this one too. Well, they all tie together, right? And this is,
Hmm.
and I think one of the analogies I saw somewhere there was stress or anxiety kind of topples the pillars, right? It knocks over confidence first, which, knocks over independence, which knocks over social skills and curiosity, right? They all kind of fall down if a child is too anxious about school and learning and trying new
Yeah.
things, right? So, but the social aspects of play and these skills we're really trying to get them to develop. One aspect of that I kind of want to explore a little bit is diversity, right? So meeting people who aren't like you. How much or how important is that in what you've seen in this kind of developing early and kids getting comfortable with either kids with disabilities or meeting kids who say just different cultures, different sound or
Yeah.
voice or language or whatever.
So I think I mean, I love the idea that children, well, they're not born racist, they're not born ableist, they're not born with any of the isms that cause discrimination. Children are very accepting. On the face of it, they don't have any lived experience to be otherwise. So I think as parents, we need to be very careful, and educators, we need to be very careful about subliminal, subconscious messaging around, othering and differentiation. But I also think that forcing it and making it an issue for young children can do just as much harm, because you're still creating labels, you know, you're still making people different, even if you're if even if it's done with good intentions. So again, play is a really powerful way of just leveling the playing field. Everybody's welcome. Come join in, play, and you are playing on your own merits. And for kids with additional needs, a child in a wheelchair sitting around playing a game of Monopoly is getting all of the good stuff from playing a game of Monopoly with their other friends, that they don't need special assistance or anything. That's
Hmm.
and it just gives them the opportunity to learn those skills. And so I think being mindful of restrictions, like physical or cognitive difficulties, or even religious restrictions or cultural restrictions on what is acceptable and not, but bringing play into children's lives and making it as open-ended and as accessible as possible, I think would get rid of an awful lot of the division within society as well, because I think it would promote that diversity, that inclusion, that cooperation. And you learn a lot about people through play. You learn who you can rely on, you learn who to go to when you're in trouble, you learn how the who's the one who can figure out the rules and everything. It's and it builds that network. And if you've got a diverse network of support as you're growing up, you're much more likely to carry that on into adulthood, because you don't have the prejudices or the fears that a lot of the prejudices are based on built in, because you've grown up with children of all different sizes, shapes, backgrounds, whatever, and it just becomes normal. So I think I want to get to a point where children are just able to play together, and we don't need to almost think too hard about the diversity and inclusion, because it happens naturally. And I think when it happens naturally, it's sustainable, it's positive. And what you're doing then is giving children, basically, social skills are a way of creating a support network for your mental health. So when you are tough, when times are tough, and when you are struggling emotionally, you've got people you can turn to help you. And which one is the one who's going to go, oh, here, have a cup of tea, let me, tell me all about it. You know which one's going to tell you to, stop whinging and get on with it. You know which one's going to come up with a practical solution of how they can help. And that social network, so you know who you can turn to when you need, depending on what kind of support you need. That's that is one of the best things we can give our kids going forward, because as parents, we're not always going to be there for them. They need to develop their own support networks, and people need people.
Yeah. Well, my hope for the world is that all of the labels go away, right? That we, as parents, as teachers, kids don't feel the need to put a label on anybody, right? You're just another person. You may look different. You may sound different. You may have different
Yep.
abilities or whatever than me, but you're just another person, a human living on this planet, breathing air, just like
Yeah.
me. And when we can get there, yes, kids will be kids. Say they don't need the label. It's the adults that teach them the labels that
Yep.
that then raises the question, right? And they go, well, why do we call them that, right? And
Yeah.
and I'm not called that, right? You're called that, right? So right, we create that differentiation with
Yeah.
label. So yes, parents have to be careful too. So let me look at my questions here. We talked about the balance play pyramid. Oh, let's talk a little bit about the your organization or platform, Fundamentally Children. It started out just as fundamentals, and then you had a transition, I think, around 2012. It was, I think, a merger. So tell me a little bit about
You've really
that.
done your homework.
I
Yeah.
have.
Um, so I was a researcher on my own. I was freelancing for about 10 years under the name Fundamentals. And in about 2010, I was getting a lot of companies that I was working with, mainly toy companies, saying, "We love the research you do, but there's a lot involved. Is there a quicker and easier way of us getting feedback on our products?" At the same time, my girls were growing up, and the parents of their friends were going, "Oh, you work in toys. How do I know whether this thing that they're bugging me for is going to be any good?" And so I decided that it was time to create a kind of a gift guide, if you like. It started off as purely as a gift guide, just to help parents, but also to give feedback to toy companies
Hmm.
on how kids enjoyed their products. And a lesson in branding. I started off by calling it my two front teeth because all I want for Christmas is my two front teeth, the song.
Uh-huh.
But if you weren't a certain age and culture, you thought it was a dentist. So I learned about branding pretty quickly and launched it as the Good Toy Guide, which had a heritage behind it. But the Good Toy Guide in the UK used to be a publication by a charity that went into administration, and I was working with the CEO of that charity, and I was like, "But the Good Toy Guide was such a good name. What are you doing with it?" And she's like, "Nothing." So I was like, "Right, well, why don't I protect its legacy and bring it online and modernize it?" So that's what we did. So the Good Toy Guide started, and it evolved into the Good Play Guide, and I think it was about 2014, we brought the research side in. So everything came under the Fundamentally Children umbrella then. So the sort of the research and consultancy, as well as the Good Play Guide platform. And we added in digital play, and we've sort of expanded. And that was 10 years ago and plus, and we've never really looked back.
Great. So how do you evaluate a toy? What's a good toy? What's
So
a bad
we
toy?
we first of all, we never name and shame bad toys. So it doesn't, it's not a review site like that. We're not going to
Okay.
give you a 1-star Amazon review. But toys are observed with kids. Kids play with toys. I don't think you can review a toy without putting it in front of a child.
Yeah.
So, and multiple children as well, because my background's academic psychology. So methodology is, and a sort of rigorous methodology is really important to me. So, any kid can have a bad day, or so multiple children get to play with the toys. They are observed normally by trained childcare professionals, or sometimes in the home setting by their parents. We get reports back from them. Our experts also play with the toy, and we write a report, so that you get quotes from the kids, you get quotes from the observers, and you get quotes from our experts as to what this toy does, how the kids are playing with it. Because so many times you see what looks like a great toy that's been designed, and it looks fancy, and the kids play with it in a completely different way than the developer had expected. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it opens up a whole other range of play opportunities. And if you do want the kids to play with it in a certain way, maybe you need to tweak it slightly. So it gives you that kind of that sense of what are the kids actually doing with it. And kids, you buy kids toys and they don't have this toy in this box and I'm just playing with this, and this toy in this box, I'm just playing with this. Barbie goes on the Buzz Lightyear rocket to the moon, and Calico Critters will be on an adventure with, I don't know, Paw Patrol or whatever it is. So kids mix and match play things, and seeing how a toy integrates into children's playful activities on a daily basis is really important. So I think, if you give a child a new toy and you go, here, kids, play with this, what do you think? The chances are they'll all go, it's great for the first 5 minutes. But it's
Yeah.
what happens next. Do they still play with it? Do they play with it with other toys? Do they play with it with other kids? Do they make something with it and show their parents? Are they proud of it? That interactivity and the real engagement is so important when you're judging whether, which is why I sort of struggle a little bit with some of those unboxing videos. Oh, look at this, isn't it great? It does this, here,
Yeah.
and then go and buy it. Well, actually, you haven't seen whether the kids actually want to play with it, and whether it's going to develop anything useful for the kids. And even if all it develops is helping them learn how to be happy or helping them learn what they like doing, that's fine. But just being able to make sure that it's age appropriate, that it does what it says it's going to do, that's really important, because a lot of toys don't.
Yeah. I love the Toy Story movies, because it does remind us of, the for a kid, the toys have personality. The toys, they interact with them, they talk to them, they have conversations with them. And as you say, mix and match. And, yeah, I think back on my childhood and some of our favorite toys, action figures and little cars. And yes, we came up with all kinds of stories to go with
Mhm.
them, which I think is brilliant. Yeah, every kid should have that opportunity. So something popped in my head though as we were talking here. Are you familiar with the Montessori system
Mhm.
at all? So one of the
Yeah.
things I like about that model is that, well, we talked earlier about kind of the autonomy, right? And the kids kind of pick. But they also, but it's structured in that, so like toys, right? They've decided what things are in the room. But then the kids, amongst those things, right, will decide what they want to go do, and sometimes with somebody else, and
Mhm.
anyways, but it's still structured, right? It's structured, but freedom within a certain context. And it sounds like this is part of what you're trying to get parents to think about is be selective in the toys you make available to your kids, because some of them are really good at spawning these things we want, right? These behaviors and lessons and confidence and curiosity, these things can enable those versus maybe some other toys that are not appropriate yet for your kid. They're just going to frustrate them or bore them or whatever, age appropriate. So, do you kind of see it that way, that this is what we're trying to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, and Montessori is, aimed at young children. And I think any parent of a toddler knows that if you take the children into a toy store, the chances are they'll have a meltdown because they're overwhelmed by choice and they don't know where to look because there's just so much going on. So actually, limited choice for young children is really good. So one of the things that we recommend is rotating toys. So, in the toy cupboard, if you've got a toy cupboard, if you're lucky enough to have a toy cupboard or a playroom or whatever, move things around on the shelves so that the things that the kids can reach themselves change.
Mm,
But don't open the toy cupboard and go, right, kids, what should we play? It's more a question of, have a small box that maybe you rotate each week that is out that they can play with, and it has a variety of different things in it. And having that kind of, so that there is manageable choice, because you don't want that paralysis of too many choices where kids go, oh, it's overwhelming, I don't know what to do, and they sit
mm,
down and they don't know it, and they melt down and have a tantrum, or they can't make a decision. Teaching children decision making skills is part of growing up. Do you want to wear the red top or the blue top? Do you want to play with the ball or the game of, do you want to play with the, read a book, whatever? Limited choices gives them the ability to make choices, and then also experience regret if they've made the wrong choice. Oh, well, I said I wanted to read a book, but actually I really wanted to play with that ball, and now I have to manage that. And that, again, really important lesson. We don't always make the right choices straight off. So, all of that stuff is really, really powerful for children.
yeah. How about sharing and
Mhm.
collaborative play. So how do you get kids to do that, right? So because that to me is not quite as natural as like curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Convincing a kid that they should share or take turns or collaborate. How do we kind of reinforce that without the kind of reward punishment schemes?
So I think I'm a big believer in natural consequences. So if we all tidy up, we will have time to have a story. If we all work together to achieve this, then there will be, we'll end up having, if we all work together to build a den, then we'll have a fun place to play in. That creating collaborative opportunities where children are able to see what the end goal is and to be able to participate and contribute meaningfully to the end goal, really powerful. I mean, kids learn collaboration. It's not something they're born with. Children, very young babies, won't really take any notice of other kids in the room. Then they learn, then they play in parallel, so they don't really interact. They'll play with other children in the same space, but they're not really interacting. And it's not until they're at least sort of, I don't know, 3, that they really start to be able to communicate and collaborate in a meaningful way. And start with things like team games where you've got older children and bringing younger children into the team so that they're all trying to work together. That can be a really powerful way of developing that collaborative approach. I think kids need to learn to win and lose well as they get older. So it's not always about, everybody winning, but where you've got opportunities to create activities where everybody can contribute meaningfully to a common goal. That's your best way of developing collaboration.
Yeah, we haven't talked specifically about sports, but sports is a form of play. So how do you introduce that into this mix? And where do you see that fitting in?
Yeah, so sport and active, I mean, generally being active is great for kids. So any activities where children are, developing their physical strength, their confidence, all of that, really great. I would say that organized sport is not one of the superfoods of the play diet because you are following instructions, you are doing what you're told, you are working to somebody else's agenda, but as an important part of a balanced healthy play diet, then it's great. And I think it needs to be, celebrated and encouraged, but again, not at the expense of the free imaginative child-led play.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you came right back to balance. That right, it's one of the things potentially has its benefits, but not at the expense of everything else. I love that. So, because yeah, that is one of the things, and we certainly see it here in Hong Kong, where you have the parents who occupy every moment of their child's time. From the moment
Hmm.
they leave school, they're in tutoring and piano lessons or violin lessons, or they're on a soccer
Yep.
team, football as they call it here. But yes, they occupy every moment of the kids' time and they have very little free time to play and just be a kid.
Hmm.
Yeah. So and they see the repercussions of it later. They have very, very high stress here
Hmm.
and very high rate of teen suicide in Hong Kong. So,
Yeah.
but they're super educated. They are
I'm
achievers.
gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm gonna say I'd rather my kids were, happy and healthy and not thinking of self-harming themselves rather than worrying about whether they got straight A's or not.
Yes, I agree. We need a better balance. There's a lot of talk about it here. And I did actually just go to an event recently with the international schools here in Hong Kong. And I was very impressed actually with some of the creativity and innovation that they're attempting to do, giving kids more freedom, more choice, more kind of open time where project-based learning and experiential learning activities. So there's progress being made. It's not all sitting in nice rows of chairs facing forward, listening to a lecture. The schools are trying to break it up. And now I have had people also tell me, now I of course come from the video game industry, and I'm a firm believer that even video games teach they teach something, right? You're going to learn
Yep.
by playing a video game, whether you're learning something and your teacher wants you to learn is another matter. But in many cases, you are learning problem solving and critical thinking. And of course, many of these games are very social. And so you are interacting, you're communicating, collaborating, maybe demonstrating leadership. There are some of these things that can come out of playing games. But I have had educators tell me there is no place for games in education. Games is something you do outside of school, and in school you don't do this.
I think that's a shame. I think gamification of learning is one of the benefits of the sort of increasingly digital age that we're living in, and I think it allows children to learn at their own pace. It allows neurodivergent learners to learn skills that they struggle to learn in a social classroom setting. I think there is a lot of benefit for gamification of learning, but I also think it comes back to the balance again. There are only so many things that you can learn through a video game, and there are a lot of other things you want kids to be learning. So using it to teach a particular thing or to give children experiences in a certain way can be educational, but it would be fairly low down my pyramid of what kids need to be spending their time on in order to develop holistically and healthily.
Yeah. Now, there are games that are specifically designed as learning games, which is a little different than just a commercial entertainment
Mhm.
game. Even though that entertainment game is teaching you something, learning skills, but an educational game is designed to teach you a specific thing. But that's really, really hard. It is so hard to develop a good learning game.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and for it to still be fun. I think
Right.
there's if you're there's a very sweet spot, and I would say Minecraft does it very well, but not many others do, where you've got mass appeal for the kids that they want to play it, and
Mm.
clear learning outcomes that you can see,
Yeah.
what's going on. And I think if it's overtly educational, it's not something that the kids would want to do. They might enjoy their math lesson more because it's a bit more fun than the old math lesson, but they're not going to go home and play the maths game because that's what they did at school. And
Right.
then you've got the mass market games where there is very little learning. There might be a little bit sort of incidental learning about winning and losing or strategy or whatever, but they're the games that have been built to keep kids playing and addicted in some ways, the unscrupulous ones. And I think finding the real sweet spot is absolutely what we should be aiming for games.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a tricky thing because the commercial games, that is the goal, is to get you hooked on the game so you play it as long as possible. Nobody wants to develop a game that you can play and you're done with it in 30 minutes. They want you to play for hours and hours and endless hours. And I will admit, I'll confess, I have spent many, many hours playing Minecraft. I love Minecraft. It is wickedly fun and but it's dangerous because yeah, you can lose hours exploring
Mm.
some new world and deciding I'm going to build this thing in there and the next thing you know you turn around and it's 3 hours later and you've been placing blocks.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yes.
why we need to make sure that toys and games and offline activities are still fun and engaging, and we need to give children the opportunity to play offline so that it's not just it doesn't feel like it's a chore. You
Yeah.
don't you don't want it to be. You want them to want to play with their friends down the park. You want them to want to be playing a board game with their siblings.
Yeah.
It shouldn't if you can build that in and make those habits good from the start, it means that the screen time battles for parents are less fraught as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else that you were hoping we would talk about that I haven't asked you?
I would just encourage everybody to go and have a look at goodplayguide.com. I think, there's a lot of information on there. There's a lot of toy reviews and game reviews, and there's also a lot of articles on how to help kids thrive in a playful way, because I think play really is the silver bullet, and I think a lot of the world's problems maybe wouldn't be quite so prevalent if we'd all played a bit more and were able to learn the skills that play teaches us from an early age.
Yes, I Completely agree. I still play. I love to play. One of my things is juggling. I do consider it a
Fabulous.
form of play. I
Yeah,
juggle
it's
and practice. Yeah, it's a skill, but it's an art form, but it's also playing. I feel like I'm playing when I juggle. So,
yeah,
sorry, one
absolutely.
last thing that I just thought of here is AI and
Hmm.
AI tutors, AI powered games. What are your thoughts on that and how do parents start to evaluate, right, how much time their kids are spending with AI companionship bots and AI
Yeah.
powered
So
stuff?
I am very nervous about the AI companion bot angle. I think AI has an amazing role in education. I think it can really help children learn in their own way at their own pace, following their own interests. So I think there is a role for AI. I think we need to be very careful about how the models are trained. I think we need to be teaching children critical thinking, and we want to make sure that they are using, it's a great slave, a terrible master, I think is probably the summary. But yeah, you want kids to be coming to you with questions about life. You don't want them to be asking some AI chatbot.
Yeah. Well, amen to that also. I'm in complete agreement. It's scary that the most popular use case for AI now is companionship. So I think we're seeing a lot of teens and even younger kids who would describe their best friend as their AI companion. So yeah, parents need to be aware of that as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, monitoring. All right. Well, any last comments? Did you have fun?
I did. That was lovely. Really nice to talk to you.
Good. Yes, I had fun too. And I truly do appreciate your emphasis on play, that this is,
Oh,
I
thanks.
say, as soon as I saw what you were doing, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I love this. Yeah. Play is important
Brilliant.
and you do it from a kind of scientific, research-based, sophisticated angle on it. Me, it's much simpler than that, but
But it doesn't need to be sophisticated. That's the beauty of play.
yes, I agree. Yes, kids need to go have some fun and goof off and be safe, but goof off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. All
Brilliant.
right.
Well, lovely to meet you.
We all benefit from playing, and Amanda has made it abundantly clear that it's all about balance. Drawing a comparison with the healthy foods pyramid, right, unstructured play is right at the top of the healthy play pyramid. So some screen time is okay, but it's about balance, right? So we have to balance that with enough um, time for children to explore and to look at their own interests and figure out what they like and what they're good at. So we acknowledge, we talked about this. It's not easy these days to let your kid just go out unsupervised in the neighborhood to play. But we need to build these safe areas into our communities and our schools so children can just be children. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. And to all those education innovators out there, thanks for doing what you're doing. You are making a difference.